Hey guys, what is up? And in this video, I'm going to be showing you all the parts needed to build a great $1,000 gaming PC. Now, $1,000 is really the sweet spot for gaming PCs because it gives you the best balance between price and performance. And with this build, you will be able to easily play any game at higher max settings at 1440p with no trouble at all. And you can even expect to play some games at 4K and still get very reasonable frame rates of about 50 FPS and higher. I also made sure when picking all of the parts to only use the latest up-to-date parts, including the GTX 1070 and one of the latest Kaby Lake CPUs from Intel, so you shouldn't have to worry about upgrading anything for some time. And if you do decide to upgrade in the future, all of the parts in this build can easily be swapped out and upgraded for better parts down the line. So without any further ado, let's get straight into the video. Kicking things off with the graphics card, we have the Asus GeForce GTX 1070 Dual Fan Overclocked Edition. And this specific one I've chosen comes in white, which nicely matches our white and black color scheme I was going for in this build. Now this card is about $375, so pretty expensive for a graphics card, but it is extremely powerful and really it's one of the best performing cards out right now. And really the graphics card is arguably the most important part of any gaming PC build, so I really wanted to spend a large chunk of our budget on it. Although I don't like saying future-proof, you can definitely expect to keep this card for some time without having to worry about upgrading. And in terms of performance, this GPU really shines when you're gaming at 1440p, and you can expect to run most any game at high settings and still get way over 60 FPS. Although this is best suited for 1440p, you can even play some games at 4K, and this card is VR ready if that's something you're interested in. It also comes with 8GB of VRAM, which is more than enough, and overall this is just an amazing card that's definitely going to perform very well no matter what game you throw at it. My choice of motherboard for the build is the ASRock H270 Pro 4 motherboard. Now this is a full-size ATX LGA 1151 board, so it supports all the parts included in this build, and it will also allow for some upgrades in the future. You have 4 RAM slots with support for dual channel memory, and it even supports up to 64GB of RAM, which is way more than you will ever need. And you also have onboard USB 3 headers, it supports RAID, and you won't have to do any BIOS update in order to get this motherboard up and running. It also matches our white and black theme we have going on in this build, so for $100 this is a very good option for a motherboard. For storage, I decided to go with both an SSD and a standard hard drive to give you the best balance. That way you can boot onto the SSD and store all of your larger files onto the hard drive. So first we have the ADATA Premier SP550, and for $80 this is a very good 240GB SSD, and on this SSD you can store your operating system, some smaller games, and really any programs that you use a lot. And by including this SSD in the build, it's going to dramatically increase boot up speed, and overall it just helps to make your PC feel much snappier. I also made sure to include a 1TB Western Digital Blue drive for mass storage, and although it's not nearly as fast as an SSD, it still is a 7200 RPM drive, so performance is pretty decent for a standard hard drive. And 1TB should be plenty of space for larger games and movies, and basically anything that takes up a lot of space, and for $50 this is one of the best value hard drives on the market. For the CPU, I chose to go with Intel's 7th generation Kaby Lake i5-7500. Now this is a fairly powerful quad-core CPU, and even though it is not a K CPU, meaning it does not support overclocking, it still has a high clock speed of 3.4 GHz, and it can also turbo boost all the way up to 3.8 GHz when it's in need of some extra power. It is a quad-core CPU, and overall it is a very good option at $200 or $230, depending on whether or not you choose to get an aftermarket cooler. Overall though, it is a very good option for gaming and even some video editing. Now since we aren't going to be overclocking our CPU, you really don't have to buy an aftermarket cooler, although I do recommend you get one. So when you're buying the processor, you actually have the option to pay an extra $30 and get a Hyper 212 Evo, and I'm going to recommend you pay the extra price and go with the cooler just because it's a great reliable cooler that's going to work a lot better than Intel stock cooler at cooling your CPU. Not to mention it will run a lot quieter than Intel stock cooler, so really it's well worth the extra $30 in the long run. For RAM, I chose to get 8GB of Crucial Ballistic Sport RAM, clocked in at 2400 MHz, and this is a very good option that performs well and is also very reliable. Now in 2017, 8GB is about as low as you should go in any gaming PC build, and considering this is a $1,000 build, I really would have liked to get 16GB. However, RAM prices are extremely high right now, so I was only able to fit in 8GB into this build in order to stay below budget. But if you're watching this in the future, you hopefully will be able to find a better deal than this. Anyway, I went with two 4GB sticks, so that way you can run them in dual channel, and that's going to give you slightly better performance rather than simply using a single stick of RAM. Although 8GB should be fine for gaming for now, I would definitely keep an eye out and try to wait for RAM prices to drop, and I would pick up another pair so that way you'll have 16GB. Moving on to the power supply, I've chosen the EVGA 600B power supply, and there's really not a whole lot to say about it. It's 600 watts, so it's plenty of power for all the parts in this build, and it is 80+ bronze certified, which is nice as well. Also, when you're buying a power supply, you always want to buy one from a reliable brand like EVGA, for example, because the last thing we want in a $1,000 build is for the power supply to cause problems because we chose to save a few bucks instead of getting a reliable one. And I actually have this exact power supply in my personal build, and I can tell you right now that I've never had any problems with it for the past 3 years since I've been using it, and for $50 it's well worth it. Wrapping things up, my choice of case is the NZXT S340. Now this is a bit pricey at $75, but it is one of my personal favorite cases to build in for actually a few reasons. First, you have a very clean minimalistic design with lots of angles. Cable management is also very good in this case, and you can hide almost every cable so it's out of sight, and the power supply is hidden under the power supply shroud, so all the cables from there are hidden as well. And it's also fairly compact for a mid-tower case, and overall it's just great all around, and you have enough space for multiple SSDs and hard drives. And this is actually the case I use for my personal build, and I can tell you the only downside I found is that the side panel does scratch fairly easily since it is plastic, but besides that, it is a great all-around case. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys found it interesting, and I'd really like to hear if any of you actually end up building the computer, and if you do, be sure to let me know in the comment section below and let me know how it went. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.